This is Shah Reyes. This is SCAI 2019 Las Vegas. With me is the director of the Cath Lab Bootcamp SCAI 2019, Binita, Shah, and the co-director is Jordan Safirstein, as well as Sohah Iqbal. Welcome.
Thank you.
So it was a very successful bootcamp for SCAI 2019. Please tell us a few highlights for this year.
Yes, so we tried to make it as case-based as possible this year. We tried to also include real-world type scenarios so that we can engage more participation from the audience as well. And I think that was quite successful. We also had some dedicated sessions to how to build a healthy cath lab. So not just touching on the cases themselves and
outcome of the cases.
Not just the outcomes of the cases, but also our outcomes, our emotional and physical and ways to improve all of that in a wholesome way.
So Jordan, what do you do in your practice for radiation safety?
Well, I actually don't do enough. I learned that. And we had an excellent talk about radiation safety, very pointed and directed for real-world tips to help us mitigate radiation. And I think I took home more from that lecture than I have from any other radiation safety. And we also had engagement from the audience, which helped bring up other points that no one had thought of to talk about radiation safety. So one thing is, our lab as a whole has not gone down to 7.5 frames per second. I think that's something that we can do as an easy change that we can make to make a quick improvement and dramatically reduce our radiation exposure.
As well as safe fluoro practice, for
exactly.
Yeah. Right. So I mean, there is a lot of concern from women in cardiology to go to intervention because of the fear of radiation, the physical burden, and also the culture in the cath lab. What's your experience and how do you kind of rebuttal this?
So I've been doing interventional cardiology for 10 years, and it's been amazing to see the amount of women that are coming through, especially this year at SCAI. So obviously we're making a change. I think radiation has been a concern, and it's really, I think the more data we get, the better. And I really like the fact that we're continuing to explore these issues with data. But I think a lot of the techniques that you talked about is really minimizing our risk. And we have the SCAI white paper that talked about the fact that we think that these risks are small, but it's still a person's preference about staying in the lab. And then, just in terms of being a woman in interventional, I think that societies like SCAI that are just going to keep highlighting what we're doing and really supporting us in our endeavors is really just the next steps for us.
All right, so moving along to medical knowledge, we come here, we learn as interventionists, but what are you doing or what did you touch during the boot camp to teach your CVP techs and nurses in the cath lab? How do you keep them up to date to have like a very collegial as well as good up-to-date outcome of the patient?
Yeah, it's really helpful for the entire team to see what other practices are doing, what other cath labs are doing, what's the data out there.
Right.
Because then it gets engages the entire team. I mean, I've had team members come to some meetings and they say, I'm never complaining when you pull out the IVUS again. It's clearly very, very important. And just having that dedicated time to sit down and listen to the data, listen to the experiences, but also learn from each other. There's a whole systems-based approach to cath lab, to the work that we do in the cath lab, and that really involves every single team member in a unique way.
Right. Jordan, any comments?
I mean, arguably, the CVTs and nurses are present in the cath lab more than the physicians. A lot of our physicians come and go or have days off, and a lot of the nurses and CVTs are there all the time. So if anyone needs to understand the importance of a healthy emotional and physical state in the cath lab, it's the CVTs and nurses, and hopefully they can be the teachers and the disseminators of knowledge. And as the fellows come through, the CVTs and nurses can teach them too. When you have a whole team who's focused on safety and knowledge, both mental, emotional, physical safety, and they're sharing that with the young fellows coming through the cath lab, everybody wins.
Yeah. I have to tell you, I learned closure devices from our techs, not from our attendings. That's what,
well, I have nurses frequently now say, to the fellow, this is a CKD patient. Do you want your pigtail first? Do you want to check your LVDP? We'll remind them of these things.
So how it's?
What I found really interesting from our Cath Lab Bootcamp were hearing from the audience what other institutions have problems with. We are mostly in academic centers, and we highlighted those problems. But then having the questions of like, well, how do we get our doctors to let us have a nursing educational session? How do we ask for that? And it was really good to realize that there's things there that we can still improve across the board for many different institutions.
Especially in the community-based hospitals or kind of in rural areas,
There's such a wide variety of different types of practices, and we need to be able to apply everything that we learn to these different situations.
If you are blessed, you are up to date all the time, but others are waiting for that.
It also, a lot of the audience members actually provided ways that they thought SCAI might be able to help them. Some labs were having difficulty finding and keeping staff, how to actually pay for or find qualified staff. That's an issue that SCAI or some people may not be aware exists even, but in rural parts of the country where they don't have a lot of people to choose from, they're having a lot of trouble keeping those staff. And it's great to hear people come from all over and share their issues that are individual really to their hospitals.
Especially when you invest in somebody 5 years, you learn all the tricks, and then eventually they leave for frustration. I mean, you have to reinvent again and train a new staff. So you're going to be involved, I'm assuming, for next year as well, for the anything you should have done differently for 2020?
Well, I think we want as much audience participation as possible, as much case scenarios, real world scenarios, involvement as much as possible, so that it's not just the didactic learning, but more so if there's engaged audience participation, there's a two-way learning happening here. Because I think one of the things that we did walk away from some of these sessions were that we don't have good answers to a few of these questions that keep coming up, and perhaps it's time for a SCAI working group on some of these topics.
So quickly going through to you, how do you stay physically, kind of, don't injure yourself physically and stay fit in the lab? What's your few tips and tricks?
So I actually started very early on. This is very specific to me, but doing Pilates. I think having the core it really helped me minimize injuries. Being radial has been excellent because I don't have to hold a groin anymore. And just keeping activity in my everyday. My cath lab is 7 floors away from my office, and I walk up the stairs every day. And I think it gives me some time, mental time, because I can't do anything in the stairs. So I think that those are some tips that I do.
Perfect. How about you, Jordan?
I mean, regular exercise is definitely effective. I think just paying attention to yourself, whatever it is that you can do to get regular exercise, to stretch as much as possible, to wear supportive stuff, leads that are supportive for your back, the lightest leads possible. All these things, I think, contribute over a long period of time to helping you keep healthy for a long career.
Binita?
Yeah, so I also started working on my core several years back, and it's really helped with the back situation. Compression stockings. I insist that we all get lunch, even if we're sitting down for 10 minutes during the day. It really is a time to just sort of, regroup and recharge. And then I will happily get on a plane and go away for a long weekend somewhere.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Really great, very thoughtful points to the audience. Please watch this video and others on SCAI-TV, as well as clinicaltrialresults.org. This is Shah from SCAI. Thank you.
Thank
you very much.